Recording in progress.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Chia's first AMA of 2024. We're going to give it a minute here for more participants to jump in, and then we'll go ahead and get started at that point. For those who have not partaken in one of our AMAs in the past, if you are in Zoom, there's a Q&A section at the bottom. You can utilize that to ask your questions. Myself, Gene, and Justin will go ahead and pick up the questions from there and answer them essentially as they come in or as the topics arise. If we are unable to get to all your questions, we do have a community channel inside of Discord where you can post and we can continue conversations inside of there as well. All right, we've gone ahead and given it a minute, so we will officially get this started. We are also live streaming to YouTube, so those of us joining on YouTube, you will have a slight delay, but we welcome you as well. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the 2024 first quarter AMA with the man, the myth, the legend, Gene Hoffman, and the guy who makes Time Lords happen, the VP of Development Operations and Security, Justin England. I'm your host, Clyde Wallace. You might know me by Brant as well, and you probably see me in Discord on the support channels quite often. Before we get too much into it, I want to do a quick PSA. We've been seeing a lot of additional scammers on multiple different platforms, whether that be in Discord, on different community forums. And just a shout out, we at the CNI staff, our community moderators and community members, will never ask to DM you. We will also never send you random links for you to go to random websites. Any of the links we provide will generally be from chia.net. So, PSA, be mindful. There are scammers out there. If you have questions about information somebody's providing to you, jump into our Discord, and we're happy to work through them with you there. As mentioned, feel free to utilize the Q&A section at the bottom of Zoom to ask your questions, and we'll go ahead and respond to those essentially in the order that they are received. We've already started getting a few of those questions in. So we'll go ahead and get started with some of the most usual ones here. So, Gene, we always have a question of when merch.
Actually, soon. We've been doing some tests against the merch store, and so people should see something in the near future, certainly this quarter. And to answer another question, I have a right eye infection, so apologies to everybody who makes it think I got punched. No, I just think I got an infection. Didn't want to miss it though.
Hey, thank you for that, and hopefully that eye infection resolves itself here shortly for you. Definitely great to see the community so concerned about all of us as well, so thank you for that. And the next question I see here is, have there been any announcements from Davos or WEC?
We're not likely to have anything from this WEF. The ongoing carbon market opportunities are there, and certainly we have folks attending WEF, but I don't expect to see any specific announcements from WEF regarding us.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Gene, I have another one for you here regarding the fee pressure that we have been seeing over the last month and a half. Are you happy we actually have a fee market now? It's
Love
nice
it.
to cool.
Look, do I love inscriptions as an implementation? Not necessarily. I think you should be able to do it natively in GeoLisp and use all the tools we have. But at the same time, it's pretty darn cool experimentation, and we're not ones to judge who wants to buy block space. I mean, at the end of the day, we're in the business of making sure that those blocks are valuable and secure, and that fee pressure is a part of that valuable security and ultimately the kind of intrinsic value of XCH long term.
Absolutely, completely agreed. And to that point, I just want to highlight if anyone does run into issues with fee pressure, we did recently release a blog article kind of discussing what fee pressure means, how to do a replace by fee option if you do have a pending transaction. So take a look at the chia.net blogs for that article there. Now, Justin, we are at the end of the Time Lord applications, and I know there are a number of questions regarding Time Lord specifically, so I'll turn those over to you. How did the sales go? What are kind of the next steps in that regard?
Yeah, excellent question. I'll start with the sales one. We are now in the process of vetting the applications and starting to reach out and have conversations with the people who have been selected to host Time Lords. a sale will grow out of that. We want this to be a very bespoke experience, like buying a Rolex, not like buying a a Mac or something like that. And so more to come on that, and we'll be reaching out to you. And I also saw a question about if we're going to notify those who weren't selected. We certainly can. The application volume wasn't so insane that we can't kind of give everybody the white glove here. So those that are not selected, we'll definitely let them know, and those that are, look forward to communication shortly from us about your impending purchase.
Thank you very much. And I know the other question that's probably in the back of people's minds is if all of the Time Lords were not sold during that initial period, what are CNI plans? And I know we've answered this before, but just to reiterate.
We have some clever things coming, right? Like we see you guys out there in the community doing really cool things, contributing, building and growing the community both technologically and from people and marketing perspective. And we'd like to reward those people for their efforts, I think. So more to come on that. My team and some other teams are coordinating on what exactly those steps look like now, but there should be something shortly we'll notify you guys about. We want to get through this sale period first to not stomp on those people that kind of willing to take the leap. Once we've settled that relationship, we got some stuff coming that I think you guys would be excited about.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Gene, I'm seeing a couple of questions in here regarding Chip 22. And for those who haven't been following along Chip 22, this is the remote harvester protocol, which will essentially allow third parties to have their own harvester and run alongside the Chia software itself. With that, it'll allow the blocks to still be farmed by the individual farmer, but still maintain a revenue option for those remote harvest developers. So, Gene, a general update on the Chip 22 progress.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically planning to ship the first implementation of Chip 22 in the next major release. I certify major because once in a while we'll see a bug and release something sooner, as we did with like 2.1.4. But I expect that 2.2.0, which is what we're kind of expecting that to be in, will be out in the next 4 to 6 weeks or less, and we'll have the initial implementation of Chip 22 in it. There may be community feedback changes to that, but we're not clear on that. We think we have a working protocol, and we're expecting folks to be relatively positive about adopting it.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. And I know one of the nice things about that is it's one of the true community chips where a lot of different parties are coming together in order to fulfill the obligations and kind of refine it from all sides. So really cool to see that progress and note that it's coming out here soon. And Gene, let's go ahead and discuss the ETH bridge. Has any testing begun, and what are kind of the next steps in regards to that bridge?
So right now, the bridge is being tested end to end internally on test nets and being initially kind of shown to some of the potential validators. One thing I would say is, I'd put a call out to other folks who want to be a validator. I think that's still a list that is to be determined. And if you have, the kind of expertise necessary to do that, which is good private key management, the ability to kind of run, high availability infrastructure, we'd love to chat with you. You can reach out to, myself or Cameron Cooper or hello@chia.net.
Perfect, thank you. And just a general comment in here that I figure would be a good time to mention it. We have Steven indicating that we need more Gene Hoffman meme videos. And so for those out there, if you haven't been following along what the Chia IP protects, you do have the ability to create some of those fun memes for very specific members of the actual Chia staff. If you ever feel like you might be encroaching on any of that IP rights or anything that might be personally identifiable, please do reach out to us before you go ahead and put that on the blockchain. But I know Gene will second this, that it's always a lot of fun to see what people create, and always great to see those new things coming out. And kind of a
Birdman, we see you.
exactly. And along those lines about really cool tools that the community is building, Gene, we want to get your thoughts on the Dexy Splash tool.
Again, love it. We'd been kind of throwing that idea around and shared it out with the Dexy folks and others because, the simple idea that you can do truly peer-to-peer global trading with no counterparty custody risk is this revolutionary thing that's really not been done before in human history. And being able to do that totally peer-to-peer on the desktop just makes it so clear how, even though it might look like the same activity in the traditional financial world, it is not the same activity at all. It is this ability for people to provide liquidity, to provide purchase power everywhere simultaneously. It's a really cool concept that there's this ability for you to just broadcast out to the world what you're willing to buy, what you're willing to sell, how much you want to sell it for. And you can do all sorts of really crazy complexities. Like, if there become multiple web front ends to it, you can make sure that each front end has the same liquidity. It doesn't matter where it gets taken because, of course, it gets canceled across all of the dexes when you have that transaction go atomic. And so that plus kind of moving to a world where we have um, a background situation of being able to do short-term, not valid after ones means that you all of a sudden have the ability to really kind of, not worry about market moves, rebroadcast, and using a tool like that peer-to-peer is going to be really powerful for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just great to see the community come together and build something like that. So I know there's already been talk about potentially having a PR to integrate it directly into the Chia client. So we're definitely keeping an eye open for that and excited for when that does come through.
Yeah, I
Now,
have a question for you, Brant.
yes.
Uh, how do you stay so patient and positive on Discord? And are you an AI?
Well, the question is out about the AI side of things. I might be one. I got to say, we have some great real-time rendering if that is the case. But really, what it comes around to is I just love the technology. I really enjoy helping people with it, and that's really where that patience rises from. Is not just working with people to solve a problem. It's really diving in to learn what is the issue behind it. Is there something more we at CNI could be doing to set things up for our users, and what steps can we refine in troubleshooting. So I will have some pretty cool guidance here within the next month or two that will update the doc site and really help with that streamlined experience for people who are new to Chia, people who have been in it for a while and want that advanced experience, or even if you just run into an issue and need some troubleshooting. So I can't say whether or not I'm an AI. I think that would be some surrealism at that point, but I believe I'm not. I hope I'm not. Now, on the other stuff that is being built out from the community as a whole, let's see here. There we go. I know one of the most interesting things we've seen the community adapt to is Chia Data Layer. And we've seen data layer used for the CAD-T side of things, but then we've also seen a big influx of data layer usage by the community for community purposes. What other improvements from the CNI side can we see on, or are we expected to see on data layer? And what else do we foresee the community building on data layer here? And I'm going to open that up to either one of you here.
Well, the big thing that we're adding, and I think it's underway as we speak, is the true proof of inclusion. So that you can basically make an offer file that would say, hey, if you make this update in your database, then I'll pay you atomically this amount of money. It really is a pretty powerful core primitive because, when you take a Web2 database as the kind of other side of the transaction, it can get very complicated in good ways very quickly. So we think that's going to be a powerful way to actually link the atomicity and self-custody to being able to then reference back to the traditional legacy systems, but then empower those legacy systems to inherit the power of public blockchains.
Absolutely, and very exciting stuff for sure. And I know one community member who is kind of taking that approach of adapting legacy systems to the modern systems within Web3 would be Michael Taylor with his work on data layer. And he has some really interesting stuff specifically regarding browser implementations for data layer and a different way to launch websites. So not only do we see that cool stuff coming out of CNI and the proof of inclusions, I know me personally, I'm very excited for them, but we also see a great uptake from the community, and I think that's very exciting as well. Now, we've had a few questions in here uh, regarding the I wouldn't say hiccups, but the minor hmm, iterations on the blockchain, such as increased signage points spam or the reorgs that we were seeing. Essentially, this concept of the different post-mortems that we identified we were going to be releasing, and we had a couple of users that wanted some insight into that. Do you mind if I turn that to you there, Justin?
Absolutely. So more information on that is coming. We absolutely know the root cause. I want to reiterate that it is not a security risk. It was misbehavior because of some misconfiguration stuff. We have fixes that are going into the next release that should solve that issue, and then it'll be mitigated for all time, hopefully. We're not going to release the postmortems until that stuff is patched and usable for everybody, just because it's a nuisance thing. If someone, you know, configured this bad setting, this chain of bad settings intentionally, they get spam signage points or, do some generally annoying but not really malicious things. And so we're going to keep that under our hat until we can allow people to mitigate it, just out of concern for our low end nodes, mostly.
Yeah, and to clarify, there's kind of three different things that are all open and somewhat related. One was signage point spam. That is actually originally was caused by a temporary misconfiguration or speeding up the Time Lords. That was the major version people saw. Now, the reorg thing causes that a little bit too. So there is why are reorgs deeper and more often of late? And we understand why, and we have a PR to fix that. And we will do a full postmortem to explain exactly what's going on there. It is interestingly around people trying to be high availability. So it's an interestingly side feedback. And then there's a other question floating around about, hey, why has the mempool been like not moving forward or not fully filling in recent blocks? And that one is a little easier to explain that there was a very large transaction which had just enough fees to be kind of right up to the edge of what could be built. And so unless you beat it, you were not getting included because our algorithm for filling mempool was a little dumb at the very end. So we're playing around with solutions to that. More happy to talk about that one. I'll tell you, Bitcoin has the same actual problem. So we're actually using their logic here. We're going to do something, I think, better than that. And that was resolved by one of our farmers taking a full block, and that got that transaction complete. So if you look currently for the last few hours, we are seeing full blocks based on demand and actually a bit of a draining mempool.
Always great to hear the additional steps that we're taking to not only resolve the current issues, but to prepare ourselves for anything else that might arise in the future. Definitely great to see all of that coming through. And thank you, Gene, for that wonderful overview. Now, Justin, we have a couple of questions regarding the blockchain database and its size. One
Mhm.
question in particular is, are we looking into ways to make a more automated process for converting from the V1 database to the V2 database now that the version 1 has been deprecated? And then the other question being, what are the thoughts regarding the size of the database, even at the V2 database, and whether or not we're looking into implementations that'll reduce that database size, such as different sharding, other light node options?
Absolutely, yeah. So the first part of the question, um, and this is not going to be popular. The database conversion tool that we wrote is the best thing that exists to automate it, and it's not great. The issues you run into is that there are an infinite number of unknown states that can be created based on where you are in the network and what blocks you have gossiped and which ones were compressed and which ones were not. Um, and so there's no like really tried and true method to convert a long running older V1 database over to V2, which is why we've had the migration period run for so long. The good news is there are some things you can try. I would say that if you're having trouble migrating, take your Chia config file, throw it somewhere safe, regenerate that config, try to throw your old config settings back in minus the one for V1, make sure that's a V2 database, and then go grab one of the checkpoints off our website and try to sync from that. Starting fresh from V2 and then syncing using your configs, not ideal, but sometimes faster than trying to uncorrupt databases or things like that, especially our Windows users. Windows doesn't give you a lot of really nice tools to manage hidden files like our database files are. And so if you're not a power user, the options are limited, and I empathize with people. I would say that the strategy I just suggested here is probably the simplest path forward for non-power users. If the database migration tool doesn't work, obviously that's the simplest path. Uh, not great. And honestly, that tool, maybe we could take a look at it, but I think that the last time we looked at it, there weren't really any optimizations left. Um, so that's a little unfortunate. I apologize for that. And then the second part of the database question was, what are we going to do about the size? So there's some strategies that Bitcoin uses that we're kind of keen on adopting here. One of them is doing like basically checkpoint truncation, like everything that's over 3 years old or over 2 years old or whatever the timeline we decide is, we can assume that those blocks are dead and buried, and we can just basically write them off by validating the hash and start syncing from further into history. That will bring the database size down significantly. I would say that this is a valid concern, but also this is a blockchain where you're running, hundreds of terabytes sometimes of plot data, a couple hundred gigs of database to validate the blockchain and create the security. Um, Not the worst investment in the state of the chain. Obviously using SSD and with the price of that coming down, I think this will become less of a concern. But we do hear people, and it's something we have on our radar. It's just right now we're in a clean up tech debt kind of phase, getting issues like the ones we were just discussing ironed out, and so those kind of improvements will probably come along later in the year, I would assume.
Also, two notes on that. Longer term, we would like to make it easier to use the torrent of the database file, so that or I'd say like the Windows GUI user, you may still have to download it, but the thing is, we may have the tools to let you just immediately go, hey, here's the file, import it, and do the right thing. So that's definitely something that's out there, and we want to add on. And ultimately, the BitTorrent solution is a version of the checkpoint. It's basically saying, hey, we're going to checkpoint about a quarter back, and if you think about it, about a year back in Bitcoin is about a quarter back in block depth for us. So it's very similar, actually. And then finally, the maximum block size here, when we go up to 100% block fill, really kind of points you to about a quarter terabyte growth per year maximum, that completely full, doing everything. And a quarter terabyte sounds like a lot, but I think we're going to start talking about having petabytes on individual machines here in the next 5 to 10 years. So never forget that the pace of increase, I saw 30 terabyte drives floating around today from Seagate, for example, is pretty fast in storage, and will be outpacing the kind of increase in what we expect the total database growth to be.
Did Seagate finally announce those? Those 30 gig drives are cool.
Hmm.
They're announced on Twitter today.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm excited for those. It was saying they should start going out to cloud providers in the first quarter of 2024, and we should start seeing the sales to consumers even by mid 2024, with a price speculation of $700 during Black Friday sales. So
The
definitely
technology there's Hammer, right? That's their
correct,
new dual layer
correct.
technology? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, very exciting for sure. It's going to be really interesting to see what that does to the Chia ecosystem as people start adapting to these larger drive sizes. Gene, kind of going off of the torrent itself, and Justin, you might have an answer for this one also. Do we monitor how often the torrent is actually being downloaded? And do we have an idea as to whether or not it's used all the time or rarely? Kind of what's the general feel on that?
We have, the same data you would be able to get from any website on, downloads from our cloud provider. It's not a metric we really track. I mean, we could go look at it. We know that it is our bandwidth profile there actively used. And also, if you're paying attention on the BitTorrent network, you'll see that there are many, many, many seeders. So, there's people that are engaged and working in another ecosystem that's kind of tangentially related because the same guy made them, which is really cool for me. I love one of my favorite days is database checkpoint day because it's like we get to do a moon mission, we like get it ready, launch the automation runs, and then we get to like watch the seeders pick it up, and it's like a really really cool like engagement thing for me because I'm like, man, people really do care.
Mhm.
One of our team just said that his ratio was 58.4 on his seed. So there's quite a bit of
we
FOA.
we also have an internal competition to see who can get the highest ratio on this torrent. Like we like fight to get it first.
I need to see how I'm doing on that one, by the way.
That's awesome. And let's see here, Justin, lightening things up a little bit. Somebody asked, "Are there any Easter eggs in your background this time?"
You'll have to, take a magnifying glass and check, man. A good magician never reveals his secrets.
As it should be, as it should be. And for those who are unaware, that was referring to how Justin would actually have the Time Lords sitting behind him in different photos and videos. And it wasn't until one of the actual announcements that Justin actually identified that's what this has been behind me the entire time. So definitely cool to keep an eye on what Justin has circulating in his background there. Now, Gene, we want to touch on the Rust rewrite. And there are certain performance sensitive parts that are being gradually built in Rust. But what is kind of the endeavor? What is the process? Do we have a general timeline?
So the giant there's two kind of driving issues. First of all, the worst and heaviest parts were already in C++. So when people sit there saying that, we only use Python, I always laugh about that because you certainly haven't looked at like VDF or proof of space. But that said, one of the goals is to be able to WASMify the entire node. So we basically like you to be able to run in WASM in a web browser, every single piece of the major piece of software that is the full node, the farmer, the harvester, everything. And the best path to that was moving over to BLS-T, which is easier to WASM and using that via Rust. And so, for example, like we don't generally now use our own BLS-PY anymore. Uh, the kind of ongoing steps on that is, type safety is one of the things that we sacrificed a little bit to get to market. And so we're out there retyping everything. And as we do that, that's, obviously points out places where we can bring Rust in to continue to accelerate some of the internal components. That said, there's no exact timeline. It's very much a what's the next lowest hanging fruit in the kind of looking at tech debt perspective. Uh, the other thing I'd say is it's unlikely that the entire bit of Python will go away. Python's very good at networking, and it would not surprise me if we continue to do networking in Python, but then everything else in Rust. And fundamentally, there are some GIL limitations in our kind of main thread on Node that I think we can get past, and we'll speed up. We'll keep the Raspberry Pi 4 supported long after we originally thought it could be. So, it is just generally we consider it a bit more safe. It's a little bit more accessible. It also is a lot easier for many people in the ecosystem because there are a lot of Rust devs that are comfortable with blockchain engineering. So it's kind of a multi-purpose thing, and it's just an ongoing process until we kind of get to a place where most of node performance is in Rust, and then ultimately a full implementation of all the wallet capabilities is Rust as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And a lot of great work there. It was definitely nice to see that migration off the BLS Pi. I know there were some minor improvements on the back end that are going to affect a lot of the additional development on top of things as well. The next question I want to turn it over to Justin for here is regarding the filter change that goes live in June. Should we expect, what are the expectations for Raspberry Pis or kind of the lower hardware farmers that we have out there, and how can people better prepare themselves for that filter adjustment?
Absolutely. I think that um, the lowest end nodes may see some concern with completely full blocks and plot filter. Those are the two things on the horizon that are going to happen that will kind of maybe raise the bar on what the absolute minimum Chia node is. I do not think that's going to raise the bar above Raspberry Pi 4, which is our current goal. And if it does, we have maybe some optimizations we can, speed up to get into the code base to help account for that. As with everything, it's a game that we're playing, balancing building new features, driving towards customer success, versus supporting the lowest end stuff you found in your grandpa's basement hardware that we possibly can. I would say that if you're asking this question, you're probably actually asking how well will my compressed plots perform after the filter, and that's going to depend entirely on where you are on usage on your system. If you are up right against the edge right now running compressed plots, you're probably going to have a bad time in June. And so you need to, look at your options for replotting or hardware improvement or something, because the plots you have at along with the filter changes are going to become progressively less efficient to farm the more compressed they are. And so the bar you've set now, just be aware that it's going to get a little bit higher to run the same things in a few months, and then a few months on from that, and a few months on from that. And so right, like that, there's not much that I can advise you there other than like what your farm can do, what your hardware is, what your resource usage is now, and kind of make informed decisions about what is coming in the future, based on your profitability and all that kind of stuff, right? Like as always, run what's profitable, run what you have. Um, did I miss anything there? Is there anything that you can add, Gene?
I was going to add a little bit. I would say very specifically, in the future, we're not going to guarantee the Raspberry Pi 4 is the minimum. The Raspberry Pi 5 is obviously kind of our next step there. However, we like it a lot because it's very good at being a benchmark on how efficient Node is running, and it has another side effect that we care a lot about, which is keeping the cost of running VM with a full node in it for enterprise customers like CAD Trust and Vera and others at a more reasonable level instead of having to run like a 4 CPU 16 gig or 8 gig, keeping it down in the 2 vCPU and 4 gig is a nice thing. Now that said, again, we're gonna not waste tremendous amounts of money and time, frankly, trying to over optimize. But we still feel that there are significant benefits that can be had. For example, some of the things around blocking the main thread that with doing things we want to do anyway, we continue our kind of ability to stay on those platforms and stay in a relatively small VM.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I think going a little bit off of what you touched on there, Justin, regarding compressed plots, there's a question regarding compressed plots and no SSD. And it's essentially, has no SSD become a threat to the blockchain security because of their high compression?
I don't think so. I think that they are participating in good faith in the network. I think that if they decide to destroy their own profitability by being nefarious, the market will correct itself, right? Like our farmers aren't stupid. They have, they're making profit-based decisions by running their farm here. And so, I think that we're in a situation where ideally the Nakamoto coefficient would be higher, and we're taking steps to, kind of reel that back in and make it more in the direction we'd like to see it with chip 22 that we mentioned earlier. Um, they have really good technology. I see why people are using it, and there are, security-based forking options that we can propose or the community can propose that, we can mitigate risk if they do decide to be nefarious. But I don't see that right now based on conversations with them, based on, how profitable their pooling protocol has been for them, right? Like I think that um, it would be reckless at the very least for them to do something even a little bit fishy. I will say that there are, like the auto update thing is still up in the air. I'm not sure where they landed on if that's still available or not in their ecosystem. So, make decisions based on how secure versus how profitable you want your farm to be. I personally don't run their technology, but I know it's really great. So, you know, grain of salt, whatever advice you might get from me on that matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to your point about the Nakamoto coefficient, we had two different questions. One, can we provide any estimates or assumptions as to when it might start to recover, as people say, essentially increase the Nakamoto coefficient? And then on the other side of that, and the first one I'll turn to Justin, the second side I'll turn over to Gene. The second side of that is what do our clients see or what is their feel about the Nakamoto coefficient and what are our responses to them?
Yeah, so the first half of that, as soon as we can get chip 22 approved and the code changes into a release, it will likely not be the next release. We're aiming at it the first part of this year, I believe. I think that there's some things that still need to happen with the chip to get it through to finalized, and we want to give everybody a voice and make sure that we have, like as we are a community-driven project and we don't get to tell other participants what to do, no SZ in particular, we are driving for consensus here because we don't get to just via fiat say this is how it's going to happen. And so we're taking our time getting it right. Once it's ready, we'll get it into the code base, and Nakamoto coefficient should recover fairly effectively. I think that it's the scuttlebutt that I've heard is that running node software, building their own node software is something that's been seen as kind of very expensive. We're fine to keep doing that. Running, custom fee enforcing farmer and harvesting software is a far more attractive business model. And so that's kind of where I think the fault lines will be, for lack of a better description.
And actually, I just want to comment. I do believe we're actually shipping an initial version of it in the next chip, so it's not the one after.
Nice.
Yeah. On our customers, we still have like a 16 Nakamoto coefficient. You have to look at the adjusted because unfortunately the way that the Mad Max farmer enforces fees makes it look like Mad Max farmed the block, but they did not. So from that perspective, when you adjust it for that, a 16 is still, I don't know what is that, 8 times more decentralized than Bitcoin, and certainly somewhere between 16 and 8 times more decentralized than Ethereum. So, the concerns of our customers, it's sufficiently decentralized from their point of view.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And to continue on the customer front, there's a question regarding CNI's plans for enterprise adoption, and it's focused on marketing. And of course, we've always had a long-standing concept of we don't really market within CNI. The word of mouth kind of does that for us. But more directly, Gene, is CNI planning to do any marketing to gain potential retail customers ahead of the halving?
So first of all, we do marketing because if you've seen us on Bloomberg or CNBC or, all the other things we do about monthly and major media around the world, that's called marketing. Um, but trying to take the template that every other blockchain has taken and failed to get any real world adoption beyond Bitcoin's gold use case doesn't strike me as a great idea. The definition of insanity is trying the same thing again and again and failing. So, from that perspective, we think that it's going to be a lot easier for people to understand which technology is going to be transcendent when they can have relatable people who are sophisticated enough to make these high end technology calls. When you talk to a top five US bank, they understand the problems of proof of stake and why they don't use it publicly. There is a reason, like, people listened to Jamie Dimon bitch about Bitcoin yesterday morning in Davos. They didn't listen to the end, where what he said is the problem is that Bitcoin doesn't have real value. He doesn't understand the security argument, I'm sure. But more importantly, because they don't have smart contracts. So his view is that blockchains are revolutionary when they have smart contract capabilities, and that's why they're doing private Ethereum right now. Now they can't do public Ethereum because Solidity is just not safe. And so, right now, the number one blocker for a lot of enterprises is the public blockchain distinction. They're still afraid, regulatorily and other reasons, about using public blockchain. Things like the CAD Trust and Vera and others using public blockchain to solve real problems is a huge positive. And, we had some things we were hoping would close in Q4. Enterprise sales is a fickle thing. And from that perspective, we had some of those things slide into Q1. We certainly expect to have additional non-carbon opportunities, talked about in the first half. And I'm just kind of answering some of the other questions that are out there. And, look, there are kind of a couple different places where we're playing. We have potential customers in luxury goods. This is to stop counterfeiting and also to kind of create additional marketing opportunities for them. It is also a category of things in like digital identity in government roles that we're definitely involved in, and also things in the banking infrastructure. There are a couple different major opportunities where real banks have real problems that aren't solved by the current kind of infrastructure that's really interesting to them. So, we proceed down those three things. We are very opportunistic because there are, other opportunities that are kind of in and around carbon. And more importantly, we see the carbon market becoming a much more kind of day-to-day market for us. One of the questions is, will there be cat trading in carbon? And our goal is to have 24/7 cats available on Chia in carbon. It's really been that we had to get, the Vera and others live, Bhutan, to get everybody comfortable with, yeah, this is how the system's going to work. And then once that's there, then you get to have the conversation about tokenization. And look, the audience for tokenization isn't necessarily Vera and Gold Standard. It's really actually the projects and the buyers. The opportunities that tokenization provide them is much more important, frankly, than simply the registration step. Being able to do a cross-border, you know, trustless transaction, because if you think about it, most all of these transactions are moving money from the north to the south. And if you are at Meta or Microsoft, it's not exactly easy to send a wire to Belize or Costa Rica. It can work, but it's not exactly the most interesting and beautiful and safe way to do it. And then, are you really talking to the person who has the carbon token you want? Being able to use the CAD Trust to verify the asset ID and know that you're doing an atomic swap for the asset ID that you're getting, and you're not being fraudulently sold something that's crap and not actually the offset you thought it was. These are extremely valuable value propositions for buyers and sellers.
Thank you very much. And I was going through and making sure that I posted as many of those questions that you responded to as you're going through them. So thank you for doing that as well. And let's see here. More on the topic of additional industries and day-to-day operations within Chia. We have a question regarding gaming, and specifically, is Fish or Efficient still going around and talking to gaming companies, or if he's back, did the talking to gaming companies tour bear fruit?
So Fish is still involved, and Fish is still, promoting using Chia for gaming and gaming infrastructure. He's also doing some projects on the side that will potentially move that forward. There is real interest, and the gaming companies have a kind of classic problem, and that classic problem is that for them, the number of wallets out there matters because they're often looking at this from a marketing perspective. And that hasn't gotten yet to be a strategic perspective. Once they start thinking about it strategically, it kind of changes their buying decisions, what they care about. And then all of a sudden, things like enforced royalties and, real custody and those sorts of things become more important than, potentially a DGen user base. So, we've always thought gaming would take more time, and we know there's kind of two types of gaming we're talking about here. One is where, things like an MMO are using object permanence and potentially even their own currency, traded and managed on chain. But ultimately, like many other things, I expect that most gamers are not going to know that's what's going on. And, a well done blockchain is getting out of your way, not getting in your way. And then there's what Bram's working very much on peer-to-peer gaming, which is, being able to bet on Wordle or other things directly peer-to-peer with no, house rake. And that is a Trojan horse for payment channels for Chia. So it really does implement, directly peer-to-peer. It doesn't really solve the routing problem yet, but it does get us a large amount of that code base. And, Bram checked in a big slug of that as recently as 4 or 5 days ago. It is a science fair project in the sense because it is kind of extremely on the far end and has led to both GLIS 23 and 24. So it's a hard project to say exactly when it's going to be done. What I can say is it feels like Bram's going to be able to hand it off in the next 2 or 3 months, but please don't hold us to that. Then that's when we start the clock where we can give better estimates about when that would fit on the roadmap. Because, once mere mortals can kind of work with that code base, we can get a sense of scope to kind of get the other pieces done. Things like GUI, working with the community to build some of the tools that you'll want to have to like discover other peers. So anyway, that's the two things we're doing in gaming, and Fish remains actively involved, though he's not a full-time employee. And that's the same with JM. Some people have asked about our commitment to the CDI. The CDI is moving forward just as was before. There's been a recent meeting in the last 2 weeks, and we expect to continue to see CDI make real improvements in the circular chain of driver use.
Thank you, thank you. And again, thanks for knocking out a whole bunch of those for us there. And on the topic of SSDs, the Circular Drive Initiative, Justin, I'm going to turn it back to you regarding, do you have a feel for when SSDs will reach the price per terabyte parity with HDDs? And if you can buy 100 terabyte SSDs today, um, it seems that they're getting faster and faster. So the initial speculation from the user is about 3 years out or so. Would you kind of agree with that or talk on that point?
Yeah. I mean, I wish JM was here to talk about this because he has the models and he showed them to me. So I'm just parroting JM here. But that timeline is reasonable. I think perhaps a little bit sooner than that. I think maybe 2.5 years. Um, two things are true. Flash is getting cheaper, and production is ramping up, along with a lot of the big drive producers struggling to iterate and improve upon standard platter drives, right? Like there have been some technological advancements in that. Seagate announced Hammer today, which is really cool. They have like more high density drives available that are spinning Rust versus SSD. But those advancements are fewer and far between, right? So I think the writing is on the wall. The industry knows it, and they are retooling their production and whatnot to go towards SSD. I think that there are a lot of applications where SSD is actually cheaper than HDD, just not for Chia farming yet. And that's the plot filter question of like, why is the plot filter changing on the cadence it is? It's to match basically this curve. The curve of SSD adoption versus HDD. HDDs are inherently going to be a little bit slower than SSD to farm, and that doesn't really matter unless the plot filter is kind of crazy intense and allowing you to like use more plots basically to farm a given block. And so it doesn't become a problem until the filter is a little more aggressive than it's going to be now and the next one. But we wanted to space those out enough that the technology shift wasn't, oh, now you got to throw all these drives out that are, you just got the other day. We're kind of aiming on like the end of life cycle for drives that have been installed at a certain period along the adoption curve of SSD. So that's like 2 for 1. Sorry for double answering, but it was related.
No, that's absolutely perfect. Thank you very much. And let's see here. Gene, I saw you wanted to tag on to some of the attack questions that we have in here. Specifically, we have one about bridges get attacked all the time. What makes the Chia ETH bridge safe?
So we agree. Basically, Bram and our view is that there isn't yet a bridging technology that can be trustless and safe. And it's billions of dollars approved from North Koreans. So what we're fundamentally doing is building a multi-sig wallet on both sides. In that, there is good history of being able to, as long as your key management practices are decent, have a distributed consensus based on signature and, have it be relatively difficult to actually breach. The bridge is a stopgap solution. Longer term, we expect that most major issuers will want to issue natively as Chia asset tokens. But to get there, a lot of the issuers look at the total volume locked to the bridge kind of from a security perspective, going, okay, if there's a large volume there, that's clear indication that we should be there as an asset issuer. So it's an important step, but we think that the sort of higher trust version is actually the safer version here because there's really no good way to get out of that problem unless and until you're a native asset on the Chia blockchain.
Thank you very much. And to that point of the ETH bridge, is there a way to help with the ETH bridge deployment as a farmer, even if we don't have the skills or legal framework to be a validator?
About the best thing I can say is, to the extent you want to like bring over USDC or USDT and then provide some liquidity, that's actually going to be interesting, but that's more from the DEX perspective. However, that's valuable because again, that lockup is very important for the asset issuers to then, move natively.
Absolutely. And going on the topic of stablecoins, we have a question in here regarding Stably and USDS. Do you know if they're still planning to bring it back to Chia?
We're currently, in conversations with them. It's a little unclear based on, where they are or aren't able to issue. The concern we had is that they were already in a kind of limited number of states. And we want to make sure that, to the extent that they're going to be available, that it's not kind of just frustrating that, it's like only North Dakota and Texas or something like that. So, to be determined. I know that their intent was to come back, but we'll see exactly what happens from a timetable perspective. It takes two parties on these kind of conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Completely agreed. And on the topic of ecosystem partners, we have a question regarding the market maker who we've been working with in order to go out and make markets for XCH. Can you talk on their performance and our opinion as to how they've been operating?
Yeah, I mean, look, the fundamental goal there is to make sure that the real markets that are our biggest markets are all pretty close in a bid-ask spread. And when you throw out HTX, which you should, HTX is mostly wash trading. We're not really sure why HTX wants to show like $10 million worth of daily volume for us that doesn't exist, but okay. But when you look at the rest, OKEx, GATO, et cetera, you'll see bid asks are pretty darn narrow, and that's exactly what you want to see. So, if you have any like weird about volume saying, excuse me, saying selling on GATO, you want to see that being picked up on another exchange instead so that the prices kind of stay within a few cents of each other.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And kind of going on the topic of how the wallet is operating and doing fee quoting, when can we expect the native Chia wallet to be able to give accurate fee quoting? And can this be done on the Light wallet?
So, first of all, there's an important thing to note about fee quoting, which is it's extremely hard. Bitcoin doesn't do a very good job of it. Ethereum doesn't do a very good job of it. Part of the problem is that you need the knowledge that Node has. And the problem with Light Wallet is that you don't trust the nodes you're talking to. So that ends up making that a more difficult process than you might otherwise expect. However, we do think we can do a few things to significantly improve the current reliability. I think there's just simply a bug in one place that would at least get us much closer. And you know what? I think you're going to find, and this is also very true in the Bitcoin sphere, things like mempool.space, I believe it is a kind of tool that lets you get real insight that you then take back to your wallet and use. I primarily when I'm sending Bitcoin, that's how I'm getting my fees. I don't, I often look at like ledgers, Fiestimator, and others, and it's just so far off what the truth of the next couple blocks is actually looking like. So from that perspective, I think long term people are going to grab fees from these other UIs, and we want to build that UI in, and maybe make endpoints that you get that estimate, not necessarily the estimate that you're currently kind of having to munge out of whatever nodes you're trusting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much. And a bit of a fun one here for you, Gene. I hear that Budgies run Chia Network Inc. Is this true?
You'll have to ask the budgie overlords.
Absolutely. And Justin, we want to talk about different attack shack attempts on the chain. Do we see there that these are state actors at play, or what are our thoughts on these attack shack attempts?
So I'm not, is an attack shack, I may have maybe misread this question. Is an attack shack a specific type of attack that's going on that they're referencing?
You know,
Or maybe.
It seemed like it. I wasn't entirely sure about that either. I hadn't heard of an attack shack attack.
I think it's a
Okay.
typo.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, cool. I just want to be sure I understood the question. Sorry for being pedantic, engineer brain. Uh, the answer to the question about generally attacks on the blockchain globally and where you might see things that there are nation state actors or more important is highly funded persistent threat actors, right? Like it doesn't have to necessarily be a nation state. There are like lulzsec and a bunch of other hacker organizations that aren't technically nation state sponsored, although maybe some of them are. Um, you will see things like global network interruptions, attacks that aren't necessarily on the blockchain, but maybe on layer 2 or layer 3 peering points. Notoriously, there's the Great Firewall of China that has caused, uh, you know, weird latency things for block propagation at times on the network that we've kind of recovered from with heaviest chain and all that kind of thing. And then the really nefarious advanced persistent threat actors are doing things like embedding technology in, webcams or in your router that you get from your telecom provider. And if they, are specifically attacking people with, say, keys to publish software or um, keys to a lot of currency or a lot of Chia coins or whatever. The best strategy for mitigating those attacks is to basically shard your custody like we're doing with the pre-farm. Short of that, cold wallets and offline storage of the key and all that kind of thing. As long as they can't get to your keys and as long as they can't drain your funds, most of the nation state level attacks will be focused on trying to compromise our employees or people who are actively contributing to the blockchain. By and large, farmers aren't necessarily going to be targeted. But if you see something, in your logs funny of, nefarious sniffing attempts or garbage connections or, just what looks like, botted, like port walkdowns or whatever, obviously say something. We're here to talk to you guys about what you see in the community security wise. Typically, though, the more advanced the threat actor is, the less obvious the attacks are going to be, and the more it's going to be a sit and wait for the right moment type of attack, as opposed to a big flashy like DDoS or something like that. Those are more nuisance attacks from smaller, less funded organizations or collectives and that sort of thing. The real heavy hitters are far more interested in staying financial gains and getting intel. They're not going to burn a 0 day to compromise a Chia farmer. I don't imagine that's a practical concern.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you for the detailed overview as well. I think that puts a lot of things into perspective for the types of attacks that state actors might employ as well. And Gene, we have a number of questions regarding verifiable credentials. One question, kind of more general, is is there anything like verifiable credential issuers currently out there, essentially an industry, and are we talking to any of them yet?
Yes, there is an industry, and yes, we are talking to some of them. There are different pieces out there, and there are opportunities in that space as well. Just because being one of the first verifiable credentialing services is on Chia has its value. Some of our customers are actually interested in doing that as well, which was kind of an interesting twist. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And let's go to the topic of SEC versus Coinbase. What are your thoughts on the case?
So, this is the real issue that's been outstanding around the SEC's view, or at least some of the extremists of the SEC's view. I can tell you that the SEC is not of one mind on this issue. And this issue is certainly a token can be sold as a security and as an investment contract. When you do an ICO, when you raise money by selling tokens directly, when you don't have a decentralized network, these are things that are securities transactions. Now, securities laws in the US are not exactly the way people think they are. They are about each individual transaction. And if you read closely, Judge Rakoff in the Terra Luna case, the judge in the Ripple case, they keep reminding the SEC of this issue. And this is part of the reason why we were very comfortable about some of our activities in selling some coins, because we are a sufficiently decentralized network and therefore aren't creating an investment contract when we're selling a commodity. The issue is that the SEC would like to take the position that no matter whether you complied or not with securities regulations on all issuances, any securities issuance taints the entirety of your token. And the core thing you see in the Coinbase argument yesterday is the judge deeply probing on, well, it turns out the SEC does agree that tokens aren't necessarily securities. So once you do that, now all of a sudden the scope of what could be regulated is much smaller. So, like Cardano, they clearly issued it originally as a security because they sold in an ICO before launch. The open question is whether that means that all future trades are securities trades or instead commodities trades when they're not involving the company. That's a harder call. In our situation, for example, you've gone exactly the opposite direction. It's more like Bitcoin, where, you know, Bitcoin still could be sold in a securities transaction because you make some, guarantees to the buyer. We're obviously not doing that. And, all of it, call it 99.5% of all chia in the circulating market is chia that was farmed by farmers and not by us. So, it's going to be an interesting decision. I expect that there's a couple out there arguments from the SEC about Coinbase's wallet being a broker dealer, which is hilarious because it's not, it's a piece of software, and that their staking might be a security. It would not surprise me if the Coinbase wins on those issues, shortly. But I kind of expect, because of the importance, that they won't necessarily win the motion to dismiss stage, is what we're at, but instead we'll go for discovery and cross motions for summary judgment, where I think Coinbase has a pretty good shot on most of its arguments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it back to the first halving. I know we had a question about that earlier, but do we have any guesses for the exact date? And for a little context, I think we should also add in, why is it that there might not be an exact date for the halving itself?
So the best estimate right now is March 8th, maybe March 9th. And that is simply, moving forward and assuming there's no strong changes in either space or time. I do not expect strong changes in time. Now, the Taste of Time Lords are deployed. We're pretty much at that, top speed, and any sort of variations there are in the points or two or three kind of percentage points. So, barring like half space falling off one day and that pushing it out a day, it's pretty good and pretty strong to estimate that it's somewhere on the 8th or ninth. Caveat, I'm assuming time zone there. So, it depends on which time zone you're in. I'm not necessarily selling you what UTC would be. I think right now it's late on the 8th UTC.
Mhm. Perfect. Thank you very much. And we're coming near the end of our questions here, so we'll do a couple of pickup ones and go back to some of the other topics just to briefly. Will we see a puzzle for data layer updates as part of the DAO design?
The DAO is out there now as kind of an alpha release with the intent to really let the community, start helping drive its uh, direction developmentally. If that's something people want, I think you'll see it, and it makes sense, obviously, to be able to, again, pull the kind of Web2 infrastructure, classic database into an otherwise governed entity using DAO infrastructure. Now, whenever I talk about DAOs, I do want to continue to caveat one important thing. What you really want is a Borg. We're using DAO just because people recognize it better, but a Borg is when you're taking a real limited liability offline entity, except setting the bylaws to manage it using the online tools. Because the problem is, if you don't do that, you guys are all general partners and have full liability. And one piece of history that we've learned is that limited liability entities are extremely valuable when people get together and try to do something. So don't forget that legal step when you're doing it. But that doesn't mean you can't have a Wyoming DAO or a Delaware LLC or a Nevada LLC that's run by the DAO infrastructure and continues those votes as real corporate voting and real, issuance of equity or partnership or whatever. So anyway, when you're playing with that stuff, make sure you have the legal stuff right, because it really could expose you to liability you don't want and don't need.
Hmm. Hmm. Most certainly, most certainly, and thank you for that. Now we have, let's see here. One question is a clarification on something you mentioned previously there, Gene. When we were talking about USDS, you mentioned that it takes two parties and something like this. And one of the users just wanted some clarification as to, why is CNI needed in that type of agreement? Isn't Stably just free to do whatever they want and can mint USDC?
Yep, Stably absolutely could go for it on their own. Stably wants some things from us, and it depends on whether or not they can provide value back on the other side. But it's not something we can really comment on further beyond. It's very much in their court what they want to do.
Absolutely, thank you. And does Chia have any goals for XCH to be a good payment coin to compete with Caspa, maybe on an L2? Essentially, that concept of, what are our goals to try to speed up transactions?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, we've always said the trial limit is real, and anyone who tells you the trial limit isn't real is completely full of it. I would, caveat that specifically in this question. Uh, but that means that you want to use L2s to scale. And right now, people have seen, frankly, poor L2s. We think the direction Ethereum took in L2s is bad. Polygon is effectively a one of one signature, even though it looks like it's a three of five. The entities are all basically controlled, and so your L2 on Ethereum means that like you can just snap your fingers and everything goes away. That's not what we're all looking for from blockchains. And then people correctly malign the current state of Lightning on Bitcoin, and that is because Bitcoin script significantly hampers what they would otherwise do to build, a higher quality Lightning, and that's well known. We're starting to finally see the Taproot wizards push some of the new cat stuff, and they're trying to get up cat to move forward. This is all in the furtherance of building real L2s. The nice thing about real L2s is you don't need just one. Everybody kind of has this like, oh my God, it's gonna be one way. If you're talking about just making payments, a straight Lightning payment channel that was kind of pre-funded by all the degenerate gamblers playing poker isn't necessarily a bad place to start to have a global routed payment channel network. And with Chia Lisp, all of those limitations are out the door. You can really build kind of like the 3.0 version of Lightning with kind of comes concepts that even were new in the last Stanford blockchain. So we expect that as demand rises, because we're not there yet. I mean, remember we're capping blocks 50%, and fees are sub penny, even though people are complaining about paying a penny. We really want to push those transactions to real time speed up on L2s because you really can move that fast.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And kind of the expediting of transactions concept, but specified to the clawbacks themselves. Do we currently have any plans to enable batch clawback transactions? And by this, it means you send a series of different clawbacks. Right now, you would have to go in and clawback each one individually. Do we have any plans for creating a batch system where it would be one clawback contract that users would be able to interact with?
So that capability is there. It's not something we're necessarily showing in a UI. So to the extent you have some application you want to build that does that, there's nothing stopping you in GeoList from being able to set it up that way on kind of a per coin basis by clawback. There are some standards that would like to be set to make sure that people can correctly get communicated that a coin that's coming into a wallet has this kind of clawback condition on it. But that's kind of happening no matter what. And one of the things is, our typo clawbacks, which is the only thing we've, fully shipped, were intentionally limited. The clawback people really want is the one that was enabled by not valid after, which is, hey, I can claw back this during the next 30 minutes, but nothing has to be done after that 30 minutes, because after that 30 minutes, I provably can't claw it back. That's coming. That's the kind of clawbacks I think people really want, which is the ability to be very granular about exactly what the business rules around that clawback actually are.
Hmm. Most certainly, most certainly. And I know there's lots of exciting stuff surrounding that as well. Now, it looks like we have one here that might be a little bit fishing, but I feel like we can definitely answer it. How do BRC20 tokens compare to cats? And the user says they hear Bitcoin eats cats for breakfast.
On the
See,
latter are the
Gene's
Bitcoin Core
previous
guy who
comments.
apparently eats cats. Anyway, yeah, no, BRC20 is a poor implementation. It's inscription. And so inscriptions rely on some central party. And the whole idea behind a Chia asset token is that no central party other than the issuer needs to be relied on at all to talk about validity. And that's important. To be able to do an atomic swap for real, you really want to have a, omni protocol color coin format, which CAT is, that is verifiable by a light wallet end user without a node being needed. That's the kind of key thing that's different, is the cat can be proven to its owner that, yeah, I own it. Or, in the like carbon offset version, Meta can go look and make sure that the asset ID really is the asset that's sitting there in CAD trust. And so they know that they're not being, fished or moved over to something else just to steal their money. So you want that programmability to be native and that verification capability to be native. And that's why cats are just so much better.
Mhm. Most certainly, most certainly. And we always like to save one of these for the end. It's going to be an open question, I believe, for all of us. But what are we looking forward to in 2024?
So I got three things. Thing one is wallet development down a lot of different axes by the community. And that combined with things like true peer-to-peer offer file trading, I think watching the offer file market get liquid and deep as we get some more of stable coins and other things online to support the pairing. I think that's going to be really exciting. The other one's very exciting for me is getting our first non-carbon use case announced. It's really critical on a whole host of levels. It's very much one of the pieces that needs to be there before we could get an IPO effective. So from that perspective, that is something we are very focused on. So, really excited about that too.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to piggyback on Gene's comment, I'm excited about the kind of the customer facing work we're doing right now internally. It's, to tip our hand a little bit, it's concerning, using the blockchain to validate things that only blockchains do that a database cannot, which is, I think, super cool. And the brands we're kind of speaking to, we're very excited about it. I think that's going to be really cool when we can announce it. And I'm also super excited about this SecP wallet. I know we keep talking about it, but it's going to, I think, unleash usability. It's going to unleash, that kind of like the enterprise grade tooling we're currently using to secure the pre-farm becomes very simple for an end user with an iPhone, any iPhone, as long as it's got a secure element, to do very similar workflow. And the other business case applications that unlocks that, people maybe are not thinking about blockchain being a solution for, I think are really cool as well, especially like security tooling and that sort of thing that are in the end using a verified signed transaction on a blockchain, but you don't know that. It's kind of to Gene's point about gaming. That stuff would be hidden away from the end user and it'll look similar to an Okta or something like that. I think those are some really cool things that we're enabling this year. And it's like when they're going to land and get into people's hands. I'm really excited to see what the community can do with them.
Yeah, and that was my third, by the way, which is really, how iOS signer and vaults are going to really change how all this works. There are a lot of things that we talk about, and look, this industry has been horrible about over promising and under delivering. What we found though is when we actually ship the stuff and you guys get to touch it, it really changes people's perception of, oh, wait, that really is different and really cool. And wow, okay, I get why that's powerful. So I think, being able to show me in a sense is going to be really interesting around custody.
I completely agree, and I got to echo that point as well. I'm extremely excited for the SecP stuff, what we're working on with Vaults. I think that's going to be a game changer for that user experience, and as Gene and Justin mentioned, it's going to bring that level of usability down to where anybody can interact with it. Another one is definitely the singleton spend aggregation. And I think that's one that's kind of slipping under the radar of most people, but the additional utility for AMMs, for any sort of market being developed on Chia is just going to be greatly enhanced with that singleton spend aggregation. Plus, there's some other really cool utility that can be developed on top of that. And then, of course, that leads into the payment channels and the state gaming channels. And I'm very excited for what Bram's building in that regard. And again, it's kind of like what Gene said, is that it's one of those show me things that, yes, Chealist can do all this. It's touring complete. You can do a whole bunch of stuff, and we can talk people's ears off all day long. But once we get it in front of them and we can show them this is how it's going to work, and you include SecP, this is how seamless it is to make it work. So very excited for all that kind of stuff there. That is all the questions that we had coming in for today's AMA, and we are just about 10 minutes over time here. So I want to thank all of the participants who joined us today. It was definitely a great AMA. Thank you, Gene and Justin, for taking the time out of your days. I know you have very busy schedules, so much appreciated there. And were there any last thoughts that you wanted to leave the community with to start off 2024 here?
Well, I'll slip one last one in from Bram, who texted me. He's like, remember the other thing about cats is that you actually can verify them in a smart contract, which is a very hard thing to do in inscription. So that's one of the key things we talk about the stuff being actually usable.
Mhm.
While we're telling Bram messages, Bram messaged me and wanted to remind everybody that Chip 22 adoption is a community thing. If you are a participant in the community and you are not civically minded, and don't aren't looking to adopt Chip 22 so that the network can be more secure, that's probably a little bit of a negative look on you. Um, I really think it's a not to put my weight behind it a little bit. I think it's a great improvement for the community, and Nakamoto coefficient being higher is always better. And then I think you did a great job here, Brant. Like this has been a
Oh,
really good AMA, man. I think we got like 66 answered. Good job, man. This was a lot of fun.
Also, we will definitely get Bram on one of these too. Don't worry. As Bram says, he hates computers, and that's why you don't see him as much on Discord and other places. But we'll get him on here.
mhm. Most certainly. And thank you both very much. And for the rest of the participants, if you did have other questions that were not answered, feel free to jump into our Discord server. And we do have a community channel there. You can also DM myself. bholmes22 or Lori Goldman on Keybase, and we can definitely work with you to answer any outstanding questions. But thank you everybody for your time today, and we're going to go ahead and disable the rest of